Hi, I'm Mariah Busher, and I'm here to talk to you today about three books that are great for dealing with communication. They deal with how to communicate with the world in general, with our communities, and with those closest to us. So the first two I'm going to talk about are Dear Martin by Nick Stone and The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. These two books both deal with very similar stories and themes. They're about prejudice and police brutality in particular within the African American community. And they handle a lot of really tough issues that have been in the news lately. So they're very timely and they deal with the subjects very sensitively. Dear Martin focuses more on how to have those really tough conversations with people that you care about in particular, as well as the world around us. The characters in that story deal with their own prejudices as well as the prejudice of people around them, their friends, some of their family members, and they try to figure out how, especially within the context of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s teachings, how to best handle those conversations without starting a flame war. And The Hate You Give deals a little bit more with the actual acts of brutality as well as protesting and making your voice heard within the world and your community in general, and trying to make sure that you tell your story and make sure that people understand what you're trying to convey. As there's also similar themes to Dear Martin. They talk about individual prejudices and how to handle those situations, but it deals far more with the greater implications of prejudice and how all that communicates together. Now I'm going to talk about a very different book. This one here, Vincent and Theo, the Van Gogh Brothers by Deborah Heiligman, is the story of the artist Vincent Van Gogh and his brother Theo. They had a very intensely close relationship and they communicated through letters. Vincent sometimes even wrote almost every day, and Theo almost as often to Vincent. To them, they were so close that they were more than brothers, and they found that one person that they could always communicate with, or always wanted to communicate with, and that they always needed someone to listen. They used the letters as their primary form of communication because most of the time they didn't live even in the same country, but especially they didn't usually live close enough to each other that they could talk to each other in person. And back then there was no telephone, so letters were about it. But the letters are wonderful. They're a wonderful communication. They tell the story of these brothers, which we really wouldn't know a whole lot about these people if we hadn't had these letters. So they offer us a wonderful legacy, particularly in showing us what Vincent Van Gogh was like, what his ideas about art were, about himself, what his life was like. We wouldn't know any of that if we didn't have this wonderful treasure trove of letters that they used to communicate with each other. But the book is very well done. It's very interesting. It doesn't read like a normal biography or even just a set of letters. It's a narrative that tells the lives of these stories, and you hear it through their letters, but you don't know that that's really how you're hearing it. It's like regular dialogue. So I highly recommend checking out all three of these stories because they offer a very interesting story. They're very fun. They're, well, not fun to read necessarily. They're very interesting to read, though. And they all deal with communication, with different types of communicating, which is very important for everyone to know how to do, how to talk to people about anything and everything, about the most important things like what your personal beliefs are, what your opinions are, how to learn to disagree with others in a very tough political climate without completely alienating them, or even without losing sight of what really is important, that connection. So all three of these stories are great communication books. They're also just great books to read, and I hope you check them all out.